I read Vanity Fair. Yeah, I know. I read Vanity Fair. I do. It comes in, and I kind of like to look at it. And I just got my latest issue. And my daughter, how I started reading Vanity Fair was my daughter was with me for a period of time because of her accident last year, and she ordered it to the house. And I just never stopped it, and so now I read it, and it's. And I felt really kind of guilty about doing it. I want you to know that. I really do. I really do. Don't tell anyone, would you please? Okay. Great. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you know, that's interesting. The first question is, was there a book that had enormous influence on you? Know, I get asked that question a lot. You know, what is my favorite book or whatever? I tend to be so eclectic in my interest. The Once and Future King always had an influence on me. I don't know, just something kind of the imagination of it. I think that. Of the recent books that I've read, I think that McCullough's book on Truman, I thought it was an interesting book. And the book that I've read most recently that I think is absolutely fabulous, which has a lot of application to the world we're in right now, is Team of Rivals. And I think it's Doris Kearns Goodwin's book on Lincoln, but taking a different perspective on leadership. And so, I mean, but there's so many books over years, over time that I've had that played a role in my life. As to what I would take with me, oh, gosh, I think I will take. I've got a wonderful fat book on a collection of Shakespeare, and that's probably the one that I take with me. Love Shakespeare, love to read it still, read the sonnets, do whatever I can. I find it just fascinating. I like Shakespeare and I like opera, but I can't take opera with me, so
I knew you were my kind of president.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Can you give us your comments about this renovated building?
Well, I think that this renovated building is a great tribute to a university that is forward-looking. I've had sort of a little bit of a laugh about it. I had a group of faculty, well-meaning and wonderful colleagues of mine, out in front of my office one day, basically claiming that we were burning books because of the fact that this library, I think, Ray, when it was original, it had about 2.4 million volumes, something like that in it, and now it has only about 1.3 million volumes. Oh, so we burned books, we got rid of them. Well, no, the truth of the matter is, and I have a very strong view about libraries. I actually have written 2 books on academic libraries, and this in many ways represents what I believe libraries should be. First of all, we're all here. It's a gathering space. We've got a cafeteria across the place. We have students flying back and forth. Yesterday I gave out some data that we had nearly 12,000 students on visitors on the first day of school when this library is open, and 4 years earlier when the old library was open, we had only a quarter of that, and most of them were asleep and a couple of them were dead. And you know, the point being is libraries no longer can be places in which you hide things and in which you're quiet, in which you're supposed to be gathered in some kind of symbolic gesture, whether what they need to be are lively places in which they really centralize the notion of intellectual values in life and community. And I think that that's what this library is. It is also the most, if not one of the most technologically advanced libraries in this country. So we are about technology. We're not controlled by it, but we are destined to use it in ways that I think are very meaningful, and we're connected to the world right here from the central part of this campus. The third thing is that it really is at the heart of the campus. The Olmsted brothers, thank you, Ray, for correcting me. I had, you know, I always thought it was Frederick Law Olmsted for years who was the architect of the Oval. It was his sons, or brothers.
Brothers. Actually, they were sons and brothers.
Yeah, and you know, of the famous Olmsted family. Okay, we'll do that. They created our Oval, but the fact that this library is kind of the marker of that intellectual conversation that takes place through the aesthetic values of our campus, I think is very important also. So it's a wonderful building, and look at it. I mean, look at it. if you're ever in the old library, if you're ever in very many libraries, there's very few that is having the kind of intellectual commerce that we see going on right now. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any favorite memories of visits to the library when you were a child?
Oh yeah. Let me tell you something. This is kind of amusing, but I grew up in a very small town called Vernal, Utah. A town of 3,500 people. It was the largest city between Salt Lake City and Denver, which is a distance, about the same distance as between Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in rural America. You know, people who are university presidents, most people think, you know, you grew up in Manhattan or Chicago, or you grew up in some kind of urban setting. I grew up in the most rural settings. It was a farming community. I went to a consolidated high school, consolidated with the Native American reservation. You know, one of my best friends, and still one of my best friends, is Tommy Running Bear. I mean, you know, I really grew up in a very rural setting, and we did not have television. It was not available, and we didn't have a movie theater. The only thing we had was the library, and so I read every book in the library. I mean, all four of them. I joke about it, but now the library was really the central part of my my existence. Growing up, it was, you know, you go to the library, get your books, come home, sit on the front steps, read them, and then go back and go through. I mean, I can remember the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and every possible kind of equation. I also I point out that I love opera because of the fact that because we didn't have a television, and we had this little small radio station, which was just an agricultural radio station. The only thing I could get on Saturday afternoons, because I couldn't watch the movies, like most kids would go and watch Roy Rogers or Gene Autry or something. The only thing I could get was KSL, Clear Station out of Salt Lake City. It's a 50,000 watt station. And so every Saturday afternoon, I would do like any kid. But what I would do is I'd listen to Texaco Opera of the Year. And so I grew up in rural America, listening to Texaco Opera of the Year. So that was my entertainment for Saturday afternoon. So I mean, I can still cite most of libretti in German or in Italian. You know, I'm probably one of the few people you know who's ever sat through who's been to Bayreuth and sat through all of the Ring cycle. I mean, my rear end still feels it, and those kind of things. So, you know, the point that I'm trying to make is the fact that I think where you grow up, it so influences the way you view the world, and growing up with that kind of atmosphere. So books were very central to my world. In fact, they were the only solid thing that I had in the sense of kind of an intellectual value system. Questions? No, I would tell you, you're not going to get me singing. I will do almost anything, but I will not sing. I'll stand on my head, yes.
I was just wondering, do you read in a foreign language, and does that
I do a little reading in foreign languages, just to kind of keep up my ability. I am, if you can imagine, I'm from rural Utah, so therefore I grew up as a very devout Mormon. And at age 19, I went on a mission for the Mormon Church. I went to Germany, where it was kind of total immersion. I mean, I lived with a German family, learned German, and spoke it for all that time. I was there for 3 years. About halfway through my mission, I was asked, because the church had decided they wanted to open themselves to move to Italy, I was asked to learn Italian, and so I started to. So I learned Italian, but the funny thing, I was just in Italy last summer. This to me at least is funny. I was in Florence hotel. The woman's hotel. I was speaking to her in Italian. I mean, it's kind of like a bicycle. You pick it up and she asked me what part of Germany I was from, because what I do is to this day is I translate from English to German to Italian, because my Italian teacher was a German. And so I read Der Spiegel off and on, which is kind of the German Time magazine, in order to be able to keep up with the language. And I read Corriere della Sera, which is probably the premier newspaper in Italy. When I go to New York, I'll kind of go to the international book stands and pick them up. So just as a way to kind of keep my language up. Questions? Anyone else have any questions? I tell you what, my time is up, as a matter of fact. So anyway, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, okay? You're welcome.